Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 unusual mourning practices. Customs around death are one of the most ritualized aspects of human existence. However, the traditions and rituals undertaken by those grieving the loss of a loved one vary wildly. One culture's strange is another culture's way of remembering Nana. In the video today we're looking at 10 mourning traditions that may seem strange to those that don't follow them. Number 10. Avoiding the name of the deceased. In some Australian Aboriginal cultures, when a person dies, the name of the deceased may not be uttered. The family and community elders determine the length of time for this naming taboo, which can range from months to years, depending on the status of the deceased. It is believed that after death, a person's spirit makes a journey to the next world. However, when the deceased's name is spoken, their spirit may be called back into this world, where it will create trouble for the family. To avoid disrupting this passage to the afterlife, community members avoid using the deceased's name verbally as well as sometimes in print. Additionally, sometimes their likeness is also avoided. Instead, they will substitute a placeholder name. This tradition can create some logistical challenges. For example, in one community, when an Alice died, one of the region's major population centers, Alice Springs, needed to be called something else for that period. Community members who share a name with the deceased will also need to use an alternative name, often their middle name, for a time. When prominent Aboriginal community members have died, there has been tension in how to report the death, given some communities' belief in the need to avoid using the name or the image of the deceased. Number 9. Making jewelry from the hair of the deceased. As anyone who has ever cleaned out a shower drain knows, human hair is surprisingly resistant to breaking down over time. Mummies from thousands of years ago have been discovered with hair that looks almost undisturbed. So, if you are looking to keep a vestige of your loved one after death, hair is a personal and durable memento. While one expert notes that humans have been saving hair for as long as we've been burying our dead. The custom became particularly popular during the Victorian era, when mourning jewelry, also known as hairwork, that featured the hair of the deceased became fashionable. Queen Victoria made mourning trendy with her public displays of grief over the loss of her husband, Prince Albert. Victoria often wore a locket that contained some of Albert's hair. However, not all hairwork was so discreet. Brooches, bracelets, wreaths, and even dioramas made of hair were displayed to honor the dead, and sometimes the living, and weaving these objects became a respectable hobby amongst middle-class women in Britain and the US. While the enthusiasm for hairwork faded after the Victorian era, the craft has gotten some new adherents in recent years. It is one of the many vestiges of the past that is being revived by hipsters. Workshops in Brooklyn, of course, give modern-day crafters the chance to create their own hair jewelry in the Victorian style. Number 8. Hiring strippers. In most places, the atmosphere at a funeral could not be more different from the atmosphere at a strip club. However, in some parts of Taiwan and China, the two converge in unexpected ways. It is a practice that began in the 1980s, and strippers would perform for the deceased and the bereaved at funerals. The strippers generally arrive in an electric flower car, a pickup truck that has been converted to a stage, and the strippers can either perform as part of the funeral procession, or at the venue, or indeed at both. This custom is more common in less well-off rural areas than in urban areas, and China has sought to eliminate the practice entirely. The reasons behind this tradition, they're somewhat unclear. Some suspect that a raucous and well-attended funeral ensures a better afterlife for the deceased, while others hypothesize that the strippers suggest fertility or provide a way for the deceased's family to display their wealth. When one Taiwanese politician died, his funeral featured 50 pole dancers in an effort to honor the deceased's wishes that his funeral be hilarious. One observer joked in the aftermath of the over-the-top funeral celebration that the city's residents are asking, "Please die one more time." Number 7. Cutting off a finger. When a loved one dies, it can be like losing a part of yourself. For some members of the Dani tribe of Papua New Guinea, the sense of loss is more than figurative. Grieving family members, usually female, amputate part of one of their fingers as a way of remembering their late relative. The purpose of the amputation is to show dedication to the deceased and placate the spirits of the dead by offering them a piece of the living. It also serves as a symbolic sharing of the misery of death and pain amongst kinfolk. Now, just as a little warning here, you may want to avoid this next bit if you are squeamish. As part of the funeral ceremony, close female relatives will tie off the tip of the finger that will be amputated. This somewhat deadens the sensation. The tip of the finger will then be cut off by a relative using a traditional blade. The remaining stump will be treated with herbs, while the amputated finger will either be burnt to ashes along with the deceased or stored in a place of honor in the home. This practice has been outlawed by the government, though the hands of older members of the community still serve as a visual record of this practice. Number 6. Posing for pictures with the dead. In the mid-1800s, photography first became widely available. This timing coincided with deadly epidemics of diseases like cholera in Britain and the United States, as well as a focus on memorializing the dead. This was popularized in part by Queen Victoria's public displays of mourning that we mentioned earlier. This confluence of factors meant that one of the primary subjects for early photographers were the recently deceased, along with their grieving families. Historians estimate that during the 1840s, post-mortem photographs were 3 times more common than wedding photographs. In some of these photos, surviving relatives pose alongside the deceased, commemorating not only the lost loved one, in what would likely be the first and only photograph they appeared in, but also the grief of their remaining family. There has been controversy over the nature of Victorian-era post-mortem photography, and widespread reporting that the deceased were propped up to appear to be standing and alert does appear to be incorrect. Likewise, many of the photos from the era labeled as post-mortem may not actually be. The long exposure required for the photographs meant that many living subjects, especially children, may have needed to be propped up or hold their poses, and may have had unnatural or vacant expressions because of the strain of remaining still. What is clear is that, as a new technology, photography quickly became a medium for preserving a likeness of the deceased and a way for grieving families to retain and share their memories. Number 5. Covering the mirrors. In Judaism, the 7 days after the death of a family member are reserved for a mourning period, where close family members gather at the same house and receive visitors, a ritual known as a sitting Shiva. In many communities, Shiva customs include covering all the mirrors in the household. There are a variety of reasons for why the mirrors are covered during Shiva. Some suggest that it is done as a reminder that this should be a time of inner reflection without the distraction of vanity. Kabbalists believe that during the week after death, the spirit, unaware of its death, hovers around the living and seeks to return to its body. Glimpsing itself in a mirror might fool the spirit into thinking that it was still alive. A more practical explanation is that worship services are customarily held at the household during Shiva, and Jewish law forbids the presence of an image, including the one reflected by a mirror, during worship. Traditionally, the mirrors are covered with sheets or turned around, though the surface can also be covered with wax or fogging spray. One enterprising company even offers adhesive Shiva shades for conveniently covering large mirrored surfaces. Number 4. Dancing with the dead. In some ethnic groups in Madagascar, even death isn't a valid excuse to miss the family reunion. Millions of Malagasy engage in a ritual called famarehana, meaning the turning of the bones, in which the corpses of dead ancestors are removed from their crypts, dressed up in new shrouds, and brought to share a celebration with their living relatives, which includes feasting, dancing, catching up on family gossip, and, in some cases, attending mass. Later, they are then returned to the tomb. Famarehana is a time of joy, and expressions of sorrow are discouraged. Generally, it happens after an ancestor appears to an elder in a dream, suggesting that he would like some new clothes. Famarehana can be a chance to honor ancestors, but in many cases it is also linked to the belief that until their bodies are completely decomposed, ancestors retain the ability to move between the realms of the living and the dead and can serve as intermediaries to God. Madagascar isn't the only place where the dead are exhumed for celebrations. Indonesia's Torian people practice a similar ritual known as manini, the ceremony of the corpses. Here, every 3 years, the remains of late relatives are dug up, dressed in new clothes, and paraded before loved ones while having their photo taken. Number 3. Picking up the deceased bones with chopsticks. Cremation rates vary by country, but are on the rise in many places, including the United States. In many places, including the US, after the cremation, the remaining bones are ground down and turned into fine ash. In Japan, which has one of the world's highest rates of cremation, things often work a little differently. They incorporate something called kotsuage, a bone-picking ceremony. The deceased's body is cremated and then laid out as a full skeleton. Then, as one researcher explains, the family comes in and, starting at the feet, then moving up to the head using chopsticks, they pluck out the bones and put them in an urn. The idea is that the person is walking upright into the urn. While extra-long chopsticks are used for the ritual, larger bones may require more than one loved one to assist, holding one bone between 2 sets of chopsticks or passing it back and forth quickly to move it into the urn. In any other context, moving one item between 2 sets of chopsticks is a major faux pas, as it represents death. Number 2. Holding weddings for the deceased. Long-held beliefs amongst some Chinese suggest that the spirit of a man who dies unmarried will be lonely and cause problems for his surviving family. For more than 3,000 years, ghost marriages, in which two unmarried dead individuals are joined in a wedding ceremony, have provided a way to calm these restless bachelors' spirits. Ghost weddings bear some similarities to weddings amongst the living. Matchmakers may be employed, the bride's family may receive a dowry, and after the wedding, the bride moves in with the groom. In a sense, her bones are moved into her groom's grave. The Communist Party of China has outlawed ghost marriage, which it classifies as a backward superstition. Despite this, the practice does continue, spurring corpse theft and even possibly murder as desperate families seek brides for their unmarried sons and brothers. Number 1. Eating the deceased. Many mourning traditions include the element of sharing a meal to honor the deceased. In Brazil's Wari tribe, up until the 1960s, the deceased lay with a meal. The body was dismembered, roasted, and then eaten by family members. While this tribe also practiced cannibalism as part of warfare, this type of cannibalism was distinct. As one anthropologist explains, it was done out of affection and respect for the dead person, and as a way to help the survivors cope with their grief. The Wari also removed reminders of the dead person, burning the deceased possessions and avoiding their name. The corpse was considered the strongest vestige of the deceased, and the transformation that occurred through the process of cutting and cooking the body was supposed to help the survivors move on. Wari elders who remember the practice do provide support for the idea that this funerary cannibalism provided some emotional peace. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel. It's called Biographics. It's biographies of notable people from the present day as well as history, from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want to watch something else right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a Biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.